The point guard may just be the most important position in basketball, and some of the greatest players in NBA history played at the point. So today, I'm going to give my list for the top 10 greatest point guards of all time. I will say, this was one of the most difficult top 10 lists I've ever done, and a lot of these can be flipped around and moved around and still be somewhat accurate. So if you disagree, leave your top 10 in the comments below, but with that being said, let's get into the list. At number 10, I've got Kyrie Irving. This number 10 slot was easily the most difficult one to decide. I was so torn between 4 different players to put at this 10 slot, and I genuinely could not decide, so I asked you guys. And judging by how close this poll was, I'm assuming it was a hard choice for you all too. It was between Kyrie, Jason Kidd, Damian Lillard, and Gary Payton. Which Kyrie Irving won? And to be honest, Kyrie was the player I was leaning towards, but he's also my favorite player of all time, so I didn't just want to be biased. But Kyrie made it onto the list at the 10 slot, and for good reason. He's got a championship under his belt with the Cavaliers that a lot of people just give LeBron credit for, but there is no way they would have won that championship if Kyrie wasn't there. He has had many amazing playoff performances and finals performances, and possibly the most clutch shot in NBA history. But besides his accolades, he's also just one of the most skilled point guards ever, and scorers ever. He's looked at by a lot of people as one of the best one-on-one players ever, and his handles and his acrobatic finishes and layups make him nearly impossible to guard. For the accolades and the skill alone, Kyrie made the list. At number 9 is Tony Parker, in my opinion the most underrated player on this list. Tony Parker was an essential piece to the San Antonio Spurs dynasty for over a decade, and as much as Tim Duncan will get all the credit, similar to Kyrie, Tim Duncan would not have these championships without Tony Parker. And what a lot of people don't remember is that Tony Parker has a finals MVP to his name from the 2007 finals. Stats wise, he never blew you away, but he was consistent for so long, and his longevity and intelligence as a point guard made him one of the greatest ever. Number 8 is Steve Nash. Steve Nash spent his prime years in the 2000s with the Suns and partly with the Mavericks, and won 2 MVPs in his playing career. As much as people say he shouldn't have won them and that it was rigged and that Kobe should have won, it doesn't change the fact that he won them and had good enough stats and was good enough to be a MVP caliber player is impressive enough. Unfortunately for Steve, he was never able to win a championship in his career despite multiple conference finals appearances. And that's a part of why he's not as high on my list as other people would have him. Steve was an amazing player though. He's considered to be the greatest free throw shooter of all time, and he was a great shooter in general and an amazing passer, and again, he won 2 MVPs. At number 7 is John Stockton. John Stockton was one of the best players of the 90s and made it to 2 NBA finals with the Jazz. Unfortunately, Michael Jordan exists, so they lost both of them, but he's got some finals experience under his belt and holds the all-time record in 2 statistical categories. Now I will say, in my opinion, John Stockton is one of the more overrated players on this list. I think a lot of what he did in his career is overglorified, and people like to throw around his achievements out there with no context. Like how Karl Malone being by his side pretty much his whole career was a big help, and when it came to playoff stats and production, he fell a lot. I think obviously he still deserves a spot as a top 10 point guard ever, but to put him top 5 is a little crazy to me. Number 6, I've got Oscar Robertson. Oscar was very hard to rank, and if you've got him in your personal top 5, I completely see why. The first player to ever average a triple-double, an NBA champion, and somebody who always showed up and had great stats. But he did play in an era that was not as talented as a lot of other players here, and I think the people in front of him did more and had more production in less time in a better era. The championship is nice, and legacy-wise, of course he deserves to be here, but the point guard is a very talented spot. At number 5 is Chris Paul. I won't say Chris Paul has gotten underrated, but I think people have started to forget about how great a prime Chris Paul was, and how good he's been for over a decade now. I know he's regressing, but he's still one of the best players in the league today. His longevity and consistency over this time is a testament to his greatness. But the one thing in his career missing is a championship. It's obviously something you have to put into consideration, but Chris Paul has also just gotten unlucky in situations. There's been multiple conference finals and actual finals where if just a few things were different, we could be talking about a champion right now. He's one of the best passers ever, and as a scorer, he's always been great. And I would say, if you take a prime version of Chris Paul and you put him up against some of the players ahead of him on this list, everybody in their prime, I might take a prime Chris Paul over a lot of them if I'm starting a team. But this is based off greatness and legacy, and as amazing as he's been, he's at the number 5. At number 4 is Russell Westbrook. The distance between Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul all time is not far at all, in my opinion, and I could genuinely see the argument for both sides. But based off what I personally hold to be the most valuable and the greatest in this conversations, I'm taking Westbrook over Chris Paul. They both don't have any championships, so there's not much of an argument there. But when it comes to Westbrook, he's basically accomplished everything that you could ask for from a point guard. The first player since Oscar Robertson did it to average a triple-double, and then since he's done it multiple times. He's got an MVP, a finals appearance, and he led OKC on his own for a while after KD left. And just talent-wise, in his prime, he was one of the most electrifying players I've ever seen. People forget nowadays, but back then he could shoot good enough to hit a pull-up jumper consistently, and his explosiveness when attacking the paint was just unreal. I know his fall from grace over these past few years has changed a lot of people's opinions on him, and if you wanted to argue longevity, yeah, Chris Paul wins that. But career for career, give me Russell Westbrook. At number 3, I've got Isaiah Thomas. The Pistons one, not the Celtics one. Isaiah Thomas was the leader of the bad boy Pistons in the 80s, and they were responsible for beating a young Michael Jordan every year. They won 2 championships, and people honestly don't give this Pistons team the credit they deserve for how good they actually were. They have this reputation as this mean, cheating team that everybody just discredits, but at the end of the day, they went back to back. Isaiah Thomas was one of the best defensive point guards ever, and he was everything you'd want from a point guard. From his passing IQ to his scoring, he was nearly a perfect point guard. Not many players at the point guard position have been able to lead their team to multiple championships like Isaiah did, and that's why he's number 3. Number 2 is Magic Johnson. And I know these top 2 are a big debate between each other, and people will argue and argue about it, but I think we're at a point where it's undeniable. And this is not going to take away from Magic Johnson at all. Magic led the Lakers to 5 championships throughout the 80s, while only playing 13 years. The MVPs, the championships, the things he accomplished in such a short amount of time is so impressive. And the fact that he was a 6'9" point guard was revolutionary. He had some amazing clutch performances and games in his career that will go down in history. And he's not just one of the greatest point guards ever. He's easily a top 10 to top 5 NBA player ever. But there's still one guy that stands ahead of him, and that's at number 1, Steph Curry. The greatest three-point shooter of all time, and a guy that truly changed the way that the game of basketball is played. He is a 4-time champion, a 2-time MVP, and the first unanimous MVP ever, and a guy who's consistently been a top 5 NBA player for almost a decade. He's still playing currently, so people don't want to put him over the edge just yet, but in my opinion, if Steph Curry retired today, he would go down as the greatest point guard to ever do it. I understand Magic's accomplishments and how great he is, but Curry's impact and greatness is just undeniable. Just as a player, at 6'3", his ability to dominate games is unlike anybody I've ever seen. The legacy he's already built is unmatched, and I think after that 2022 finals run, that was the moment he really became the greatest. But let me know what you guys think. This was a very hard list to rank, so let me know what you guys would have done differently in the comments below. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching. And with that being said, I'm out of here, and I'll see you on the next one.